we'll move on from the new signings, and with them coming into the team, obviously there's a bit of discussion. So I thought we'd talk about the best XIs going into the season. I think there's quite a few positions which are probably nailed on. So we'll probably speak more about the kind of the toss ups. First of all, I mean, we've all probably got Andre Onana in goal, unless Tom Heaton makes a quick recovery from his injury.
I'm
Probably
hearing
not.
Henderson is knocking about, so
Yeah. But I think the Luke Shaw, Lisandro Martinez, and Rafael Varane. I think that's all in agreement between us. But I think the first one, which is somewhat of a discussion, is Aaron Wan-Bissaka versus Diego Dallo. I think neither of them have really like shown in pre-season that they deserve the spot. They both have been a mistake for goals where they've passed the ball inside. It's quite similar mistakes in that respect. But what are your guys' thoughts on that kind of battle? They both kind of had a half of the season each last year. Do you think someone will take control more so this year, Yusuf?
I think it'll be Dallo. I think Dallo should start season. Out of the two, I would say he had the more impressive preseason. Like that game against Dortmund, fantastic. Even against Lons, he was really good outside that mistake. And there was kind of 10 minutes where you could see it got to him a bit after that. But generally, I thought outside, obviously, the mistake is really bad, but preseason's, better happened in preseason. I think he just suits this team a lot better. He's really comfortable inverting, playing. I'd actually say he's in some ways more comfortable inverting than Luke Shaw is. Like Luke Shaw's obviously a better player, that's not in debate, but in terms of inverting into the midfield, Dallow's really comfortable. I think people forget how useful it is that he uses both feet very well. And I actually think he overlaps a lot better than he's given credit for, but Anthony isn't always kind of finding that overlap. So I think Dallo fits the team, and I think over the course of the season, we'll see that quite a lot. I mean, even Wan-Bissaka, when we've seen him play, we've had to compensate for the fact he's not the most comfortable in build-up. So against Arsenal, it was Mainu kind of dropping into that back line, into that right-back spot, whilst Wan-Bissaka played quite high up. And I think Ten Hag will want his fullback to be a bit more comfortable as the team gets better. So for me, Dallo will win the battle, and I think he is the one who should start against Wolves. But Wan-Bissaka is a useful player.
Yeah, Nick, do you kind of have the same opinion, or do you think it will be a bit more of a fair battle between them in the season coming?
yeah, I think in the Dortmund game is where Dallo went, actually, no, I'm gonna put on a performance here. I agree that neither of them really done too much to be like, this is my position. But if I had to say any of them did, it would be Dallo in that Dortmund performance. And then it was very telling that then again he played on Saturday, which that Saturday starting 11 looks like possibly what is going to be our starting 11 against Wolves. But like Yusuf just said, in Aaron Wan-Bissaka being a very useful player, with us being in the Champions League, especially now, there are going to be games where he may want to rely on Aaron Wan-Bissaka. There is going to be games away against Liverpool or Arsenal or City where Wan-Bissaka does come in. I still think there is a world where Aaron Wan-Bissaka could do better this season, but I agree that I would go with Dallo, and I think that Dallo's ceiling is higher. So I think if you're going to put your time and energy and sort of try and prove one of them more, I would go with Dallo as well. Yeah, I reckon so.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was an interview with Wan-Bissaka which came out this week, I think on the Telegraph, and it was a really interesting interview as well, kind of talking about his resurgence from last season, because I think it's quite impressive that we're having this debate right now, because this time last year, the first half of the season, it looked certain that he was going to be leaving in January, the January coming in the window. But obviously, World Cup injury for Dallo, and that gave him the opportunity. And I think I kind of am in agreement with you two that Dallo is probably the better option long term. Potentially, you'd want to replace him with a better right back, and he be the understudy. But with the options right now, it's probably Dallo a bit more suited. But I think Wan-Bissaka's kind of the way that he just kind of stayed behind the scenes, worked hard, got back his spot, didn't really kick up a fuss. I quite like that in a player. But moving on from him, we'll go into midfield. I assume it's kind of Mason Mount, Casemiro, Bruno. Are there any kind of outside shouts? I know Kobe Mainu really impressed during pre-season, injured now. Do any of you guys kind of see him pushing for a starting spot, whether it's rotation wise, once he's back from injury?
I mean, it's hard. I think if you stayed fit throughout preseason, then maybe there's a possibility. But at the same time, I'd still say no, because you've got Casemiro who's not going to be replaced. You've got Mason Mount who you've just bought for 50 odd million, and you've got Bruno Fernandes who's your captain. So I don't think he starts ahead of any of those three. I think if, say, in a difficult game coming up against City, against Liverpool, say if you play a Bruno or a Mason Mount on the right, and you want a bit more security in midfield, maybe you put in Kobe, but even that's a big game to put him into. So I reckon later on the season when he is fit, we'll see him in cup games. But for him to replace any of the starting midfielders would be very, very difficult. So I do think the midfield three is pretty nailed on for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
So yeah, I think he won't start too much. What I can see him doing a lot is coming on later in games. I think Casemiro might start to tire a bit more because given he's in his 30s now, he's got a lot of mileage behind him and not really had big injuries, but you want to keep him protected. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Manu come in and just start one for him every now and then later on in games. I think I would like to see him play in one of those 8 spots in some games, and I think, like Nick said, in the cups is probably best for that. But I don't see him winning a starting spot this season, but I think he will really impress.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously there also is the potential that United get Sofian Amrabat. There's kind of reports we're waiting for Fred to move on officially, which it looks like is going to happen in the next couple of days. If that signing did happen, do you see Amrabat coming in to kind of rotate with players in that midfield? And what do you think of the signing overall, Shez?
Yeah, I think well, hopefully we get that deal done because I think for the price and everything, I think it's a really good deal. And I think Amrabat will play alongside Casemiro a lot. I think if he does come in, because at times I think, let's say late in games like last season, we saw that we were just fumbling leads, like especially away from home. And I think away from home maybe we might just start with Amrabat and Casemiro as the two, and then Mount might drop to the bench, or like Nick just said, one of Mount or Bruno might go out to the right, and we'll kind of just just be a bit more solid in the middle, and kind of just limit the opposition and try and hurt them on the transition, especially because Mount and Bruno, that's kind of their, well, especially Bruno, that's where he excels. So I think if Amrabat does come in, like imagine closing off a game like with Amrabat and Casemiro in the midfield, it's going to be very difficult for a team to come break it down. But I think just the Amrabat in general, I think he should be coming in. Like he's comfortable, dropping in into the center, the last line. And I think in general, like it would just be good to add some depth, much needed depth, especially. I don't know. Some people have suggested that maybe he displaces Casemiro, but I don't think he'll be able to replace Casemiro, especially not this season. I think Casemiro will still start like most games. But like Yusuf said, maybe, he might be subbed off, 60, 70 minutes, especially if the game's, like one or two in a what, like maybe we can afford to do that and protect him. But I think Amrabat coming in will definitely get a lot of game time, I think, if he does come in.
Yeah, 100%. And on the kind of like midfield diamond point, or putting one of the midfielders out wide, I think that could be really useful. But I'm hoping that it is Mason Mount who kind of gets that position, because I think, Nick, you mentioned that he kind of, his best period in his career under Tuchel was kind of playing from the left or the right in a front three. I really want him to see him, Ten Hag, try that rather than moving Bruno there, just because I think Bruno isn't as involved in the game when he's out there, and he usually drifts out of the game. But moving on to the front three, I mean, it's a weird one because I feel like there is kind of a popular front three that a lot of people will choose, but there's also outside shouts. I mean, Garnacho, like, if he continues to play how he was playing in the latter preseason games and how we know he played last season, I mean, he could easily push into the starting next side. But Yusuf, what is your starting front three for United going into next season, would you say?
As of right now, I might get shouted at, but so as of right now, obviously Hoyland is not available, so I'm going to discount him from this. I'm going to say it's got Nacho on the left, Sancho on the right, and Rashford in the middle. And
So
I
you're
would,
leaving Anthony out.
I'm leaving Anthony out, and you know what? My backup right winger is Pelistri.
Oh,
Wow.
that's harsh.
Oh, well, what's your what? I know you're not the biggest fan of Anthony, um, but let's talk about Sancho. I mean, he's had a positive preseason, and like he looks like he's got. Like I know some people say he's got an extra yard of pace, but it's kind of more of a saying. But he genuinely looks like he's got an extra yard of pace. What have you made of his performances in preseason so
He's
far?
he's just looked a lot sharper. Like at times last season, you could see it wasn't just he looked slowly. It's like so you when you think of Sancho at Dortmund, you imagine that really clean, crisp decision making, him operating smoothly. It wasn't like that. It was very kind of lethargic at times, but this season he was always kind of making the right decision. He looked confident. He was trying to nutmeg people. He was trying to do skills. And I know that's like, okay, it's not a street match, but you want Sancho doing this kind of things because when he's confident, he's capable of so much. It was just last season, he was a bit lethargic. He wasn't confident enough. He didn't back himself to take the man on. And now he's doing that. And I actually think he was really good towards the end of last season on the right. That Chelsea game, I thought he was fantastic. That pass for Martial's assist, that's not a pass. Most players in our squad shoot in that position, but he saw, okay, you know what, there's a different option that gives us an easier goal. He passed it. I would like to see him get minutes on the right. I think the fact he can play in this false nine position is a huge benefit as well. But yeah, he looks quicker. He looks like he has been working really hard. A lot of people did express concerns about that, but to me, it does really look like he's working hard.
Yeah, definitely. And if Hoyland does come in, do you think that he will come straight back into the strongest XI, or do you think Garnacho starting games? Obviously, he was really impressive off the bench last season, but starting games perhaps consistently for the first month might sway Ten Hag's decision to keep him in the XI and perhaps ease Hoyland in a bit more.
I think, yeah, like I think he'll balance it out. I think some games we'll see Garnacho with Rashford out wide. Some games we'll see Hoyland as the nine. Well, with Rashford central with Garnacho wide, sorry, and Hoyland is the nine with Rashford wide. Because I think at the end of the day, we have to remember Garnacho is as good as he is still young too, does still have his own developing to do. And some people still think maybe he's not ready to start all the games yet. So yeah, I think Ten Hag will balance it. We'll see a lot of rotation, but I think Garnacho as a starting player is probably more ready for United at this minute than Hoyland is. But Ten Hag will want to get Hoyland playing. He will want to give him minutes. We also have to remember Hoyland can only play one game a week for a while, is what the reports are saying. So it'll probably be one game on the weekend, maybe in the Premier League. We have Hoyland starting with our wingers, and then Rashford goes up front in the midweek games with wingers outside of him, and Garnacho comes in.
Yeah, yeah. Shez, we'll go on to you. What would you say is United's strongest front three going into the season?
Well, I think obviously on paper it's gonna be, Rashford on the left, Hoyland up front, and Anthony on the right. I think that's probably what we'll see a lot if everyone's fit. Let's say if everyone's fit and everyone's available, I feel like that's what we'll see. And obviously with Garnacho, I think he's gonna play like a lot as well, like off the bench, whether he's off the bench or starting. Um, Obviously starting the season, we'll probably see, Rashford centrally and Garnacho on the left maybe, or I don't know about Sancho on the left though. I think I'd rather see Sancho centrally now. I think now that we've seen it all off the right, Sancho on the left, it's just I think he almost has too much time to think when he's on the left hand side. Like when he's approaching his fullback, he'll just be slowing down. And it's almost like he doesn't know what to do at times. Whereas in central areas, for example, he's got less time to think and he's got to make quick decisions. It's more like muscle memory. He kind of knows what he's doing in tight spaces, and he's more effective in tight spaces as well than I think he is, taking on a fullback. So, yeah, but I think it would probably be Rashford on the left, Hoyland up front, and Anthony on the right. But I do want to see Garnacho start a lot on the left, and I don't think Rashford's going to stop Garnacho's like development. I think if Garnacho does start popping off, then Rashford's going to either have to go up front, or he's just going to have to hold bench for maybe a couple of games, because I think Garnacho, like, if he does start, firing, I think you can't stop that. You can't stop, and it's just the same with Rashford as well. Let's say Rashford's firing off the left as well. I think Garnacho is going to have to ride the bench for a bit, which is fine, because I mean, like, he's been doing that for a while anyway. So, but yeah, I think it would probably be Rashford, Højlund, and Anthony, and obviously on the right wing situation as well. I do want to see Pellistri play a bit more, but I did like Pellistri on the left as well when he played. I think it was against Dortmund, and I think he looked really good. So maybe that's like the utility forward on both sides that we kind of need. The same with Sancho as well. Maybe they can both kind of fill in certain games and just try and work their way into the squad. So yeah, that would probably be my front three though.
Yeah, definitely, and I'd probably say Rashford and Garnacho are both really positive coming from the bench. So, like you said, if Rashford is in that position where he's rotated and he's on the bench for a weekend, he can come off the bench and make a massive impact. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting front three. Nick, do you have the same opinion as the other guys, or a different front three?
Yeah. So I reckon, when we start, the season starts, it's going to be Garnacho, it's going to be Rashford, it's going to be Anthony. I hear Yusuf's shout to start Sancho over Anthony, because I understand that Anthony gets frustrating. I would still start Anthony over Sancho, not because I love Anthony, but I just think Sancho hasn't shown me enough in wide positions to go, yeah, I'll start him over Anthony. And I still feel like there's a bit more to Anthony that we haven't seen, and hopefully he can kick on this season. Now, when Højlund comes back, I reckon, so he's obviously going to start up top, and I think you have to start Rashford on the left in the big games. There's no way you're going to start Garnacho over him, I don't think. But the thing is, even in that circumstance, I really, really still want to see Garnacho play. I know the balance wouldn't quite be right, and I know off the pod we spoke about how Eric would want a left footer on the right. And there's no way where I think it logically makes sense to have all those three, but I would love for that to work, because I just think those three, obviously we don't know Højlund yet, but if he comes and he kicks on, those three would be our most electrifying players up top. And I love watching Garnacho play football, even in moments where he doesn't produce something. He's so silky on the ball, even in a way which Rashford isn't, in my opinion. His first touch, his second touch, the way he keeps the ball so close to him, the way he can drop his shoulder and get past the player. I love the kid. So, yeah, if there was any way to get all three of them in, I'd love it. I don't see it working out, but either way, start of the season, yeah, it's going to be Garnacho, Rashford, and Anthony.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we touched on earlier kind of the potential for kind of going split strikers with Rashford and Højlund, and I think Rashford played almost behind the striker, behind Weghorst a couple of times last season. So you never know, something like that might be able to happen, but perhaps unlikely.